So this is the 50-page toolkit, which y'all should have received. It has all the information you need in order to implement the digital media campaign for the semester. Um, there's the table of contents at the beginning that we hyperlink to each of the sections, so hopefully it's a little bit easier for y'all to navigate throughout the semester. And generally speaking, we can all assume that we're all here because we want to support survivors, we want to advocate for a safer campus community, and we want to educate our peers. And so that is the purpose, that is the main mission behind this campaign and with SANASA in general. And there are four overarching goals. For these four elements, there's four main elements that are, I don't know how much y'all have gone through the toolkit yet, but when you go through it, you'll notice that there are four sections on social media posts, on posters, on videos, and on email blasts. And those four elements will be utilized in order to achieve these four goals here. These goals are sequential in nature and build on top of one another. The idea is to start with the first goal and go from there throughout the semester. So first, we want to increase knowledge of the sexual violence terms. This was something I noticed really early on going to college, that people would be talking about gray situations, but didn't have the language or the ability to talk about it properly, to be able to define their situations to help their friends and themselves. And particularly during the beginning of the year, I'm sure we're all aware of the red zone, when students, particularly younger and newer students, are at heightened risk for assault and violence during the first couple of months of the fall semester. So this is a critical time in order to create that baseline knowledge for all students to have. So first, increasing that knowledge, and then from there, another issue that I saw while at UCLA was we had a number of really great confidential and non-confidential resources on campus and in our surrounding community, but a lot of times people just weren't aware that they existed or that they could use those resources or where and when they could be used. So that's the second goal, is just increasing awareness of such resources. And then the third goal, regardless of the resource, even when I was working at UCLA Care, which is one of the confidential resources for survivors at UCLA, we would still very much be aware of our shortcomings and how we could improve. And we would be talking with staff members of the office and leadership of where we were falling short and where we could be providing for UCLA students better and helping survivors. So we do want to increase awareness among the general population at our schools of how these resources could be improved. And from that, lastly, the fourth goal is to empower people to advocate for change. It takes a huge group of people from a variety of backgrounds and interests and specialties working committed together in order to create sustained real change. So it takes all of us being committed to this goal. So those are the four main goals for this campaign. From that, I then put a suggested timeline. This is very broad and already needs to be adjusted, as I have a number of items here for September. September is already over, and then it's going to be Thanksgiving and then winter break. And that's just how it goes. But as long as you're constantly checking in with people in your clubs, adjusting schedules as needed. They're always going to need to be adjusted. But constant communication will ensure that items are put out there and that goals are achieved. And so for this suggested timeline, I put for each of the four elements. For social media posts, they're being used for all four goals. So there are four different sets of posts and graphics. basically, my suggestion is to start with the posts about sexual violence terms, then to resources, then shortcomings, then advocating for change. Posting those on your platforms throughout the semester, ideally, and this is in the toolkit later on, but ideally posting once or twice a week on the platforms that your organization has is ideal. Um, for posters, there's two sets of posters. One for the first goal of sexual violence terms and the second goal of resources. Um, I had these at September and November, it doesn't really matter, just have them in 2 separate months. Starting with sexual violence terms, could do it in October, and then going into November posting about the resources around campus. For the video, the video is only for one goal. It is for increasing awareness of the resources. Um, Videos are a really great tool. They definitely get a lot of traction. They're fun. They're a creative outlet for this at times very difficult work. And only downside is they take a lot of time and a lot of effort. And it's definitely a team effort getting a video together, planning that and getting it out there, editing it, all of that. And so I would generally recommend giving yourself anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks for that whole process. There's always going to be setbacks, but just being aware of that from the get-go definitely helps. And then lastly, the fourth element is the email blasts. And that's quite simple. That's for empowering people to advocate for change. The fourth goal, that's going to be a brief template that I included later on. And that's just going to be sharing that out on social media, email blasts, what have you, to get people to send out that email. So it's going to take some time, not too much time. And I suggested doing that a little bit later in the semester once we have this baseline knowledge put out there for everyone. Yeah. So going into the first element, social media posts, I'm going to be spending most of my time on this element. Social media posts are definitely used the most by student organizations, nonprofits, professional organizations, what have you. It's definitely where most of my background is in. And you also mentioned that y'all were looking to see how to utilize social media for your continued efforts. So getting to that, also for each of the elements, each of the sections, there are 3 subsections. There's the fall campaign, which will give you everything you need, graphics, captions, information to implement this element of the campaign. This one goes on for a while. And then there's tips and best practices for to help you implementing that and just like going forward if you want to use that type of element in your club's work. And then also just some other examples for future work to show you some other things that I've done for organizations and how this could be used in other areas. So the first set of social media posts are for defining the terms. And the terms here, we have one graphic for Instagram and one graphic for Twitter. Those are going to be linked down here. Those are the Canva links. They should be accessible. If they're not, please let us know and we'll change that. And we have also put captions for both of those platforms. Now, if your organization only uses one of these or both of these platforms, just use whatever is useful to you and feel free to change these to be usable on other platforms. Instagram and Twitter were like the main ones that I've been using for a while. So that's why we focused on those. And the terms we decided were sexual assault, consent, intersectionality, toxic masculinity, trauma, and rape culture. And that was partially based on a poster campaign I've done in the past for new students at UCLA that was successful, and also just discussing with E and others at NISCASA of what are important terms that all college students should be able to talk with one another about. And if you notice, the design for all of these it's very evident, very clear that they are part of a series, that they belong together. Creating that kind of cohesive identity and image is really important for different campaigns, to have that larger impact on your audience. If it wasn't obvious that they went together, then it wouldn't appear to be like a sustained effort that this is something we really want to focus on, aka defining these terms for all of us to use. So that's also something to take note of. And then we've also provided more content ideas at the end for Instagram and Twitter, as well as TikTok and Reels. I have very limited professional or personal experience on TikTok, but it obviously is a very important platform to use right now, very popular, particularly among adolescents and young adults, college students. And that's another thing to keep in mind, is always being aware of what platforms are popular, which ones are being utilized, what the recent trends are. When I started college, the top ones were Instagram and Facebook. By the time I was a senior, none of the freshmen had Facebook accounts. So even like within 3 years or less, it can totally change. So just always make sure to be on top of that, particularly when utilizing social media. The second batch of social media posts are for the second goal, highlighting the resources. Here I've created templates for your confidential and non-confidential resources. I created examples for a couple of UCLA's resources, and just use their school colors as the design for this one. And I also created a template for featuring positive quotes from survivors who used these resources. And we definitely found like different campaigns. We would a lot of times use quotes and do mini interviews with survivors or other students on campus or activists. It creates it humanizes the issue to hear someone's words rather than just seeing a statistic or learning a fact. And I do think they are quite effective at getting more people involved in this work and in this effort. And again, the templates are linked here. I didn't write up a caption because it's specific to whichever resource you're highlighting, but we did write some caption ideas there. And again, some more content ideas. The third batch is about the shortcomings, and similar to featuring the resources, this one includes a quote. This time around, it's a negative quote about someone's experience using one of the resources. And also featured some statistics here, trying to visualize them a bit. I just pulled information from one of Ms. Costa's resources, one of their studies they did, but you can pull from whichever resource you find applicable to your campus and using this type of format. And then the last goal is post advocating for change. This one's pretty simple. We can all be advocates. Then we have tips on how to be advocate, just 5 little pointers of small little things that people can do to get involved. And then this is the call to action for the email blast that you can share on social media and raise awareness around that issue that you're advocating for, whichever side it is, and getting involved in advocating change for that issue. And then, as I said, there are 3 pages of tips and best practices here. I'm not going to go through that now. You can go ahead and read through that on your own. There is a lot of really useful information, a lot of good pointers. What I am going to do instead is I'm going to stop sharing that. And I gave a brief presentation on Canva and graphic design last week now I forget, part of my introduction I didn't give. I am now working, I'm interning at a couple of places this semester. One, very much similar to UCLA Care, but at Columbia, Sexual Violence Response. And I'm also working over at NYU Langone at one of their family centers in Brooklyn, working with Project Safe, which is these sexual health peer education groups with adolescents. So I'm working with their media outreach and branding group. So we're teaching the students how to use Canva and graphic design to educate peers on sexual health topics. So I'm going to share that presentation now. If y'all don't use Canva already, you definitely should. It's super, super useful. I think pretty easy to use, intuitive. I used it probably with every group I was involved in at UCLA. I worked at a communications firm for a year and even used it there. No matter where you're at, people are using it. It's just at canva.com. Very simple. You just create a design up here, and they have a bunch of templates that you can use. For this presentation for them, we were doing Instagram posts. So that's what I used for this example. And especially with shared accounts, it's very important to title your designs. They can get very disorganized very quickly. And another thing with student organizations, with so many people involved and people going in and out of organizations and school in general quite quickly, organization is essential. So we don't lose anything and that we're continue being able to build on top of one another's efforts and contributions. On the left-hand side, there are a lot of really useful things you can use for creating a graphic. I almost always start with a template. I think their templates are really great, and they have a wide range of them. I don't think I ever just keep the template as is. I always edit it to my liking or whatever my purpose is for making that graphic. But regardless, it just helps get the creative juices flowing and gives me like a starting off point. And another thing is that all of these items have a search function, which are quite useful when looking for a specific type of thing. And then I just kind of went into more of the specifics, nitty-gritty of changing color, moving around elements, different functions you can do to manipulate these elements. And the elements here, that's basically just going to be graphics and icons. You can also insert fun fonts, and they have a number of fonts, and you can also upload fonts if you're using specific brand identity. Pretty easy to change all that there. And just quickly going through all the other items on the left, you can upload images, videos, and audio, photos. This is quite useful because there isn't going to be any copyright issues, which you would run into if you're searching photos on Google or something, but all these are free to use. Background and more. The backgrounds, I don't find terribly helpful. I don't feel like they look that professional a lot of the time, though I will say these colored backgrounds with the gradient I do like, and I did use for some of the graphics that are included in this campaign. And then when you're done, just share and download. You want to download as PNG, and then you're done. It can take, like for something like this, where you're just promoting a new video or something, less than 5 minutes, super simple, or it can take over an hour. Definitely some of the ones that I made for SANASA took a bit of time creating that good foundational design to repeat over the course of multiple posts. But yeah, I think it's a lot of fun, very easy to use. And then just a couple of things about graphic design in general. Graphic design, as we know, is all about grabbing people's attention and making information easy to understand. And so here are some examples of graphics I made for UCLA Care. You have Know Your 9, Denim Day, and then this was a graphic for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. For colors, you typically want to use 2 to 3 colors and their gradients. So for example, here are UCLA's brand colors. You got the blue and the gold and the white, and then you have the gradients for the blue and the gold. And there's a note about accessibility and visibility. You want to make sure that there is a high contrast between the colors that you're using, particularly when it's the color of the text. You want to make sure the text stands out from the color or photograph behind it and can be easy to read even at a distance. For fonts, you want to use a maximum of 2 fonts and their variations. So that means bold or light, medium, etc. And you want to use either 1 sans serif and 1 serif, or 2 sans serifs, but not 2 serifs, which is getting a little technical. but that's the reason behind that is basically like using 2 serifs, a font like this is just going to get a little chaotic, a little disorganized. So that's the general baseline for fonts. And again, with visibility, you want to make sure that you're not using too small of a text so that you can read it from a distance. A lot of times I'll be like writing something on the computer, put it on like one side of a room and see if I can see it when it's full screen. If I can't read it, then it's too small. This is really getting more into graphic design with the placement of the elements. And I used an example here. These two graphics at first glance look very similar. At the end of the day, they're quite different. This graphic is fine, but just a few adjustments and it's a lot better here. And also just making sure that we're focusing on our main message throughout this graphic, which this one was not as good at doing. So a couple of notes on placing elements. You want as much as possible to keep things centered and aligned with one another, to keep those simple, clean lines, keep it visually appealing, easy to read, how your eyes will navigate the graphic. You need to make it easy. And you also want to use all the space. With graphics, you have very little space, and you want to maximize it as much as possible. But you also want to make sure that your elements and the text are balanced on the graphic. You don't want to have it clumped in one area or one side. Then it's not going to look as visually appealing, and it's going to be harder to understand. And you also want to make sure that your main message is emphasized throughout the graphic. A lot of times I've noticed with graphic design, there's so many things you can do. There's so many fun elements or decorations that you can put in that people go a little overboard and then you distract from the main message. So make sure to just keep it simple, and always remind yourself, what is the purpose of this graphic? It's kind of similar to, I don't know if your English teacher, professor has ever said, but like, what is the point of the sentence? If this sentence doesn't add to my thesis, then I'm not including it. And you should think the same about graphics. If this icon doesn't add to the message, then don't include it. But also at the end of the day, get creative with it. There's a lot of things you can do fairly easily on Canva, manipulating icons and different things, create your own. So always have good fun with it. This is branding that's specific to the organization I was presenting to last week, but a note on branding. It is good for a club organization to at least have a logo and a color or two that they use throughout their materials. If you want to have a fleshed out branding identity, from there you'd probably just add a couple of fonts that you use as well. But regardless, if you don't have that specific branding outlined, at least have meetings with one another on what you want your aesthetic online to look like. That's really important, so everyone knows a general direction of where you're trying to go, of what you want your digital presence and your physical presence on campus are two separate things. You can reach a wide community, you can reach the international community online, and so that's definitely something important that should be discussed. Clubs that I was a part of in college, at least a couple of times a year, we would meet as a group and we talk about what we wanted our digital presence to look like. And we would collect other Instagram accounts that focus on similar topics, and bring up examples of posts and aesthetics that we wanted to emulate on ours. And it created a good understanding among the whole group to be able to work together of achieving that goal. And then lastly, these are just some examples of the graphics of the template that I started with in the final graphic. And so with this first example here, you see I didn't change it all too much. Just some small edits and put it on brand for UCLA. Whereas this one changed quite a bit. But again, you can see how this still inspired the final product. But yeah, so that is social media. I'll take slight pause if there's any questions right now, and if not, there will be time for questions at the end.
Any questions for Katie so far? Oh, we got one in the chat. Can you see that, Katie, or you want me to read it out for you?
I brought it up. Will we have access to PowerPoints? Sure, I can share the PowerPoint. I'll send that over to E. Or yeah, definitely. I'm glad it's helpful. And then, so here are the examples of other things, other graphics I've made. This one, very, very informative, very useful. It's literally just quotes from different like legal organizations of what constitutes as sexual assault and domestic violence. But a note about this, and it's stated in the toolkit that something like this would definitely need a content or trigger warning. And whilst this is useful, it's probably not the best way that information could be spread, but it's quite factual. Cool. So moving on to posters. There are two sets of the posters. First set is defining the terms. Second set is highlighting the resources. As you notice, these are the exact same graphics as the ones that we use for social media. And why is that? We did discuss potentially creating poster campaigns about other pertinent, very important topics. But at the end of the day, we felt it was more important to increase the amount of exposures that people are getting to this information and these graphics. I forget exactly the specific number of exposure one needs, but it's somewhere between 4 to 7 exposures before someone actually begins to retain and remember the information that they see. So now with the social media posts, they're seeing it online, they're seeing it shared on Instagram, on Twitter, and now they're seeing it in their dorms, on campus, in the dining halls, etc. So focusing on those two very important aspects there. And another thing about posters is a lot of times there are regulations and policies on different campuses pertaining to the posting of materials like this, of where and when they can be posted. And that has definitely slowed down the progress of poster campaigns for organizations as well in the past. So just being aware of that and planning for that ahead of time to make sure you don't fall behind on whatever timeline you have set up for yourself. And another note is making sure that they're strategically placed where students are likely to see them. And so one thing that could be good to do is posting them during one meeting 1 week and seeing like which one survived. And then based on that information, posting the second half of those posters the next week. That was another thing that for one poster campaign I did, we did it all in one batch. And then turns out we did not post in the right spots and they're unfortunately torn down or like the weather got them and stuff like that. So just being mindful of where and strategic about where you're placing them on campus. So this was some other examples that you can refer to. This was a poster campaign I did my freshman year that was posted for other freshman students in the campus dorms for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. One poster was posted in each dorm per week. And that was really successful. I saw them all over campus. That was really cool. That's another thing too, rather than posting them outside, which is a lot more unregulated, posting them in dorms is going to be like a higher success rate of like them actually going up and staying up because that is handled by RAs. And then this is also a photo campaign. So poster campaigns versus photo campaigns. I really love photo campaigns. I think they're great. Again, it's a lot more of like a humanizing aspect of these issues and these topics. And also depending like how big your school is or something like that, then, you're seeing your friends and you're like, wait a second, what is this organization you just got involved in? Like, what are they about? What are they doing? And so this was for Domestic Violence Awareness Month several years ago, hashtag relationship goals. And for this was pretty simple and we got a lot of people involved and it was really great. We just posted on Facebook saying, hey, if you participate in this campaign, you get 30 to 45-minute free couple photo session. And all you have to do is provide us a quote about why you love each other. So that was a lot of fun. Moving on to videos. The video for this one, for this campaign, is specifically for increasing awareness of the resources on campus. The second goal, this video that I've included here was actually a video that I made for UCLA, and again, was very helpful for students. A lot of times, unfortunately, due to a lack of funding, lack of space, these resources meant for survivors and students are shuffled around campus. They move around a lot. They're in some random office on the 5th floor of some building never heard of on the side of campus. So that's something I saw at UCLA. Even like being someone like myself who was heavily involved in the community, I could barely keep up with where are they, when can I go there, etc. So this video, the basic premise is having someone stand in a central location, whether it's a plaza or a statue that like everyone on campus would know where it is. Giving a brief overview of confidential, non-confidential resource, and then walking to that resource and speeding up, time lapse for that section, so people know where to go from there. So here I've written out the concept, the time frame. Again, it's going to be a month or two to get all of this done, and then creating a team. Again, this is a very intensive process and it's definitely really important. I have tried to do a series of videos. I know other people have tried to do a series of videos and taken it on just like as their own personal project. This does not work. Never goes on for more than like several videos, if that. So making sure you have a dedicated team to help you out through the entire process is really important. And a couple ways to make sure that happens. Unfortunately, I mean, you have to do what you gotta do, but I have made it a requirement in the past for board members or people in leadership positions in the club be involved in the video or write a blog post. Basically, like the basic understanding is if you are taking on this leadership position, then you're expected to do this at least once a semester, once a year, whatever it is. You can also, of course, typical is bribing people with free food. Free food always works. It never doesn't. And also, being mindful of people's time. You can also dedicate meeting times, whether you meet once a week, every other week, whatever it is, using all of or a portion of your meeting time to go around campus and post posters or work on the script for the video and working on these larger projects as a team. I ran up the equipment, locations, and then this is the outline. Anything in brackets you'd fill in yourself. It's quite broad because it's very dependent on what resources you have on campus and in your local community. But yeah, and then I wrote up plan and some more content ideas. Again, video format is a lot of fun and it can be used really well. And so there's a number of things you can use, not just, highlighting the resources. And we've also linked a couple Instagram accounts that we believed really exemplify how you can utilize video format the best. And so onto the last element are email blasts. And this is just for the fourth goal, advocating for change. And again, this is an element where you're going to have a lot of flexibility to focus on what is important to you and your students in your community. I wasn't directly involved so much with the email blasts, even though they were definitely used in organizations I was in. That was more of the policy advocacy side of it, whereas very much the communication side. But you can use them to advocate for change or one side of an issue for policies on campus or legislation at a city, state, national level. Whatever is going on this semester or arises, this is definitely an effective way to get a larger community outside of your clubs or outside of health organizations or even outside of your campus. Just getting as many people as involved, because as I previously said, it's really important that we have people from all backgrounds and disciplines working together to advocate for these changes. And so here's a very brief outline template of what you could do, of what you could write up. And basically you just promote this on social media around campus using that graphic or other graphics, educating people about the issue, explaining your position on the issue and why they should care. And then they just copy and paste this email, insert their name at the end, and send it off to the responsible person. So that's a pretty simple way to get people involved in advocacy, and it is effective. Like phone calls, emails to politicians, they actually do something. So definitely don't underestimate the power of simple actions like this. And we've linked a couple of examples at the end here. This email blast is quite short, whereas this one's much longer and very extensive. So that just kind of shows the range of the flexibility you have of writing it up the way that works best for you and your goals as an organization. So those are the 4 elements, giving those overview of those 4 elements. Just a couple more items. As previously said, evaluation is super important. That's why we have, for SANASA, we have the pre-evaluation survey for y'all, as well as the post-evaluation survey. We can't improve our efforts, we can't do better in future years if we don't evaluate our current and previous efforts. So in addition to the post-evaluation survey, it's important to be evaluating your work as the semester goes along. And so here I've written up different ways to evaluate each of the 4 elements. For social media posts and videos, pretty simply just keep a running document of its reach and its engagement, whether that's likes, comments, and shares on the different posts. And all that information can be found fairly easily in the analytics section of the different social media platforms. For the posters, a baseline stat is just how many did you print out, how many did you put up, and where and when. That's just good information to have. Keep track of where people could be seen and getting those exposures to this information. But another good thing that could be done is conducting a simple informal survey of students on a heavily trafficked area on campus. Just asking, 1, have they seen the posters? 2, what is their overall reaction to them? And 3, if the posters taught them something new. That's just taking like a quick temperature check of student population and making sure that you're on the right track, that you are, not repeating information they already know, and that they're seeing it and they're understanding it. And then lastly, for email blasts, in general, we can always just keep track of the movement of any pertinent legislation or regulation, regardless of whether you're currently doing email blasts or advocating for anything. It's just good as activist organizations, as educational organizations, to have a current knowledge on the politics surrounding this issue, whether on campus or at the larger community. But in addition to that, if you are using setting up the letter campaign through Action Network, then they also have this cool feature that you can use to track how many advocates are engaging lawmakers and administrators. So that's how you can evaluate all your efforts. And then with the post-evaluation survey, you'll be sending that out in early December for y'all to fill out. And we just ask that that is sent back to us by the new year. And then a final word on practicing self-care. Self-care is obviously extremely important. This work is so rewarding and so important. Like, I obviously believe that to the fullest. I'm in school for it. I'm dedicating my life to this work. But at the same time, working in violence prevention, working with survivors of these violent crimes, like, it is very taxing and tolling. and practicing self-care is of the utmost importance. When I started doing this work, practicing care was mentioned, but it honestly was not emphasized nearly as much as it is now. And I think the pandemic really was a big catalyst in shifting the conversation around this. Um, but if you don't practice self-care, burnout is very, very real. When I got involved early on, I was not good about self-care, and I did get burnt out, and had stepped down from my position um, on board of an org for a couple months because of that. And from that, that was a learning experience for me. And I've learned to really implement different self care practices in my daily and weekly habits. And as we all know, self care includes a huge range of activities from anything like cooking or reading or hiking, doing nothing. It's whatever heals and revives you. And that's an essential aspect of this work. Um, is, we can't take care of others if we're not taking care of ourselves first. Um, and another helpful exercise that I've gotten in the habit of doing over the past several years is just doing a personal like temperature check with myself. Um, Usually like every week, like on Sunday or Monday, just mentally like preparing for the week, I'll ask myself, how am I feeling? Have I had enough time to rest in the past week, physically, but also mentally and emotionally, socially, that sort of thing. And then reflecting on the past week, what is one thing I'm really proud of and what was one thing that was difficult, and always making sure that the work that I'm doing is fulfilling me more than it is draining me. And if it is draining me more, being aware of that and brainstorming different ideas, different tweaks that I could do to my schedule and my work in order to not get drained from it. So I find that really helpful. And then a quick note about sustained advocacy is there's so many great organizations on campus these days doing incredible work. But one thing that I've noticed at my time at UCLA and now is creating sustained effort is really difficult, especially on colleges where people are so busy, people are graduating, people are moving. Um, one or two like essential members of club graduate, and then unfortunately the club disbands within the next year. So while doing the important work of educating your community and supporting survivors, advocating for change, another top priority has to be recruiting people and making sure that you're always getting new people involved in your organization. So there's that sustained effort towards your goals and your mission. Um, there are a couple organizations I was involved in that would do an application interview process, which I think is great. I have no issue with that. But because of that process, they're only accepting new members once a year at the beginning of the year. And because of that, like I and many others joined much later or weren't able to join at all. And I think that's a huge detriment. So if you are an organization that does have such a process, I would just suggest having that occur at least a couple times a year to give students multiple chances to join you in your efforts. And then at the end of this, we just have the additional resources. We have resources for student survivors and student activists, both online resources as well as books, and also a number of links for culturally specific advocacy, which is obviously very important in our multicultural populations that we work with on campuses. But yeah, that is the 50 pages of the toolkit that goes over the digital media campaign for the semester. And I just like to reiterate that I really enjoy putting this together. I think it has a lot of promise, and I'm super stoked that y'all are involved with SANASA this semester, and we'll be using this as a template for your efforts this fall. But yeah.
Let me hit the stop record button.